The Xfinity 500 race at Martinsville is one for the history books. After the race, the drivers and fans had to wait back at the track for NASCAR to announce their fourth driver for the Championship 4 at Phoenix. While William Byron has been confirmed as the fourth driver in the final race of the playoffs, things could still change. NASCAR is still reviewing a number of incidents that happened on track, which could affect Byron's result at Martinsville. Joey Logano and Tyler Reddick already secured their spot with wins with previous races, and Blaney's win in Martinsville secured him a spot as well. So with one spot remaining, it was between the HMS driver and the JGR driver. Both of them were cutting it a bit too close to the chest with a championship spot on the line. At that very last lap, Christopher Bell made a move to get past the 23 of Bubba Wallace, which was all he needed to do to get into the final race. But after doing so, he slightly lost control of the car and hugged the wall. Although it didn't affect his finishing position on track, NASCAR's rules indicate that hugging the wall is not allowed while racing due to safety issues. Although it was an accident and it didn't give Bell an advantage, NASCAR had no choice but to penalize him. As a result, William Byron advanced into the Championship 4. After this decision was announced, Joe Gibbs marched to NASCAR's office to fight for his driver. However, he came out and said, "It's over." NASCAR said that this decision is not up to be reviewed or appealed, so JGR cannot do anything to reverse this decision. NASCAR penalized Bell after he drifted up to the wall in Turn 3 on the final lap and rode along it through Turn 4. Similar to what Ross Chastain did in 2022 to make the title race with his Hail Melon move. But all hope is not yet lost for Bell. After the race, questions were raised on how Austin Dillon and Ross Chastain raced against William Byron, all three drivers driving the Chevy. It seemed as though Dillon and Chastain were not at all attempting to get past the HMS driver. They basically allowed him to stay ahead, as he was the only one among them that was fighting for a championship spot. And given that they all drive for Chevy, there's an unwritten agreement that they should support each other in the race and do what's good for the manufacturer. During the race, a radio message was aired on broadcast where the drivers were told that Byron was fighting for the last place in the Championship 4. This was the team indirectly telling the drivers to not overtake Byron. Fans were definitely not happy about this as there was less racing seen on track. It looked as though all the cars were practicing social distancing with one another. This is not NASCAR. We want to see cars fighting with everything they've got to get the best result achievable in every race. Sawyer said NASCAR did not focus on either issue immediately after the race, but there will be a lot for officials to discuss this week. "We'll look at everything," Sawyer said. "As I said earlier, we want to go back, as we would have done anyway. We'll get back, we'll take all the data, video, we'll listen to in-car audio. We'll do all that, as we would any event." So there is still a small possibility that more penalties could be handed to the drivers before the season finale at Phoenix. Since NASCAR is a private organization and doesn't care much about playing by the rules all the time, NASCAR could strip Byron of playoff eligibility if they think that the spot was handed to him by Dillon and Chastain. If this happens, there will be no HMS or Chevy drivers in the Championship 4, which would be a huge loss for the manufacturer and the team. If Chevrolet and Hendrick Motorsports are left out of the NASCAR Championship 4, it would be a remarkable departure from the typical playoff landscape, impacting the competitive field, the sports fan base, and potentially NASCAR's long-term dynamics. Chevrolet has long been the manufacturer to beat in NASCAR, with HMS as its premier team. Having 4 cars in the playoffs, HMS entered the season with high expectations, especially with William Byron's standout performance. However, if a penalty removes Byron from contention, it would leave the Championship 4 open to Ford and Toyota, a rare sight, as Chevrolet has consistently placed a driver in the finals in recent years. For Chevrolet, which has historically thrived on titles and top finishes, this absence would disrupt its streak of dominance, reflecting how Ford and Toyota have steadily closed the performance gap. Hendrick Motorsports, a team synonymous with NASCAR championships, would also feel the impact. HMS has defined eras in the sport with icons like Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon. For fans and competitors alike, their absence in the Championship 4 would signify a power shift, emphasizing the growth of teams like Joe Gibbs Racing and Team Penske. NASCAR's prestige as a manufacturer-driven sport might lose a layer of narrative without a Chevrolet-backed HMS driver to chase the title, particularly since their playoff appearances have become expected and even assumed by fans. This scenario could force Chevrolet to reassess its strategy, not only for HMS but for the entire Chevy lineup in NASCAR. Chevrolet's absence in the Championship 4 would highlight the need for the brand to double down on its driver development and team support strategies to prevent a repeat in future seasons. For HMS, the potential of missing the final race could prompt new internal strategies for the upcoming seasons, whether by strengthening their playoff approach or reevaluating team compositions. If Chevrolet doesn't make the finals, they'd likely funnel resources into positioning for the following season while Ford and Toyota ramp up their branding, promotions, and fan engagement. Toyota, with JGR-backed Christopher Bell potentially stepping into Byron's spot, would see an invaluable opportunity to further assert their dominance, while Ford's presence with Penske's Blaney and Reddick would allow them to capitalize on a chance to build brand identity around these drivers. NASCAR thrives on the loyalty fans have to specific teams and manufacturers, and Chevrolet has one of the most loyal followings in the sport. The absence of a Chevy car in the Championship 4 would not only disappoint their core fanbase, but could also impact Chevrolet's brand visibility in the sport's biggest race. Without Chevrolet's involvement in the title chase, fans who tune in largely for their favorite Chevy drivers might lose interest, affecting NASCAR's viewership numbers and event dynamics. In contrast, Ford and Toyota have a golden opportunity to strengthen fan engagement, possibly attracting disenchanted Chevy fans temporarily or even permanently. NASCAR sponsors and advertisers who tailor promotions around the Championship 4 drivers and their fan bases would also be affected, with Ford and Toyota capturing a bigger share of that marketing space. From a broader perspective, Chevrolet's absence in the Championship 4 could signify a potential shift in NASCAR's competitive balance, where Ford and Toyota, having pushed hard to close the performance gap, might now hold a new advantage. A year without HMS or Chevrolet contending in the finals could encourage other teams to redouble their efforts, believing that the traditional giants aren't as invincible as they once seemed. For NASCAR itself, it's a sign that the playoff format continues to evolve, with new faces and manufacturers ready to compete at the highest level, contributing to the sport's excitement and unpredictability. If William Byron's penalty indeed sidelines Chevrolet, the Championship 4 will mark a shift as fans and teams witness the emergence of a final round defined by other teams and brands. For Hendrick and Chevrolet, this exclusion would be a call to come back stronger next season, while Toyota and Ford would capitalize on the opening to assert their place in NASCAR's elite ranks. If William Byron avoids a penalty and remains in the Championship 4, it would leave Joe Gibbs Racing without a representative in the final battle, marking a significant departure from recent seasons where JGR has been a consistent playoff powerhouse. Joe Gibbs Racing has built a reputation as one of NASCAR's premier teams, regularly contending for championships and often placing drivers in the Championship 4. This season, having no JGR car in the final round would break that pattern, potentially signaling a need for JGR to reevaluate certain aspects of their approach. Not only would this endanger JGR's streak of playoff relevance, but it might also reflect the growing competition from teams like 23XI Racing, Trackhouse, and Team Penske, which are rapidly closing the gap with stronger driver lineups and technical resources. For Toyota, which relies heavily on JGR as its primary team, missing out on the Championship 4 would be a disappointment, as it limits their visibility and brand presence in the sport's most crucial race. While Toyota's expanding alliance with 23XI Racing is promising, JGR remains their core partner in NASCAR, and not having them in the Championship 4 could make Toyota question whether to further diversify their partnerships or bolster JGR's resources to secure a spot next year. With JGR missing from the Championship 4, the spotlight would shift to 23XI Racing as Toyota's only potential source of championship representation. This dynamic could place extra pressure on Tyler Reddick, who would then carry Toyota's title hopes solo. For a relatively young team like 23XI Racing, contending for the title would be a tremendous opportunity but also a massive responsibility, as they'd represent Toyota's best chance to take home the manufacturer's championship. 23XI Racing, co-owned by NBA legend Michael Jordan and JGR driver Denny Hamlin, has shown rapid growth, but shouldering Toyota's championship aspirations would be a new level of exposure and expectation. This moment could accelerate their credibility in NASCAR and position them as Toyota's rising star, potentially reshaping the balance of power within Toyota's teams. For JGR, watching another Toyota team rise while they sit out the Championship 4 would add urgency to improve performance next season. In the end, whether Chevrolet or Joe Gibbs Racing misses out on the Championship 4, the playoff field represents a shift in NASCAR's competitive landscape. With new teams challenging established powers and Toyota, Ford, and Chevrolet battling to assert dominance, this season's finale promises a thrilling showdown and a potential reordering of NASCAR's hierarchy. For fans and teams alike, it's a reminder that no spot in the Championship 4 is guaranteed, fueling excitement for what lies ahead in Phoenix and beyond.